So for today, we will talk about a topic entitled Your Consulting Service. So earlier, we were talking about the idea of consultancy, consultants. We've taken a look at clients. Now let's take a look at what you are going to do to your client, which is specifically known as your consulting service. So the big idea here is that in order to work as a consultant, you must decide what service you are going to offer to your clients. And the challenge with services is that you need to know what they are and how to deliver them. But it is also equally important to be able to position them, what you know and how to deliver them with your clients. It's not that simple. Uh, and even if on the level of expertise, you're really good at something. Okay? Let's say you're very good in networking, network technologies. But if you don't know how to position that to prospective clients, you won't be able to deliver the consulting service that you think you're capable of delivering for them. Now, let's focus on the service itself, or in a way, we try to answer this question: what do you have to offer clients? The obvious starting point for developing your service or service line is to think through what skills, experiences, and capabilities you have. In short, you don't really have to go far. Take a look at what you currently have, okay? Things, skills, expertise that already exist, okay? And that's your starting point. The thing here is that when we advise would-be consultants that they think through whatever skills, experiences, or capabilities they always have this certain level of anxiety that they really need to be like the best in the world. Like there's nobody else who can do the same thing as what they're doing across, let's say, a billion other people, right? And sometimes there's this pressure to think that they have to be really, really good in everything else. So not only in one domain, but perhaps in a gazillion other domains. Well, the immediate advice that can be offered to would-be consultants when they start thinking about their consulting or service line is just relax. Okay? Sometimes you just need to know enough. Okay? And you'll realize that when you're dealing with clients, it's just enough that you can deliver something for them, which is not lacking, to be sure. I mean, no client would want to be given a service that can be perceived as lacking. But at the same time, you don't really need to give your clients like over the top type of service. Maybe in some cases, if that's really your concern, but of course, doing it all the time is something that is not sustainable. So, in other words, you just need to have that sweet spot in between, not too little, but not too much. So, relax. You just need to know enough and just have that objective, realistic assessment of yourself that, okay, this is what I can do because these are the things that I can these are the things that I've experienced. These are the things that I currently have, and nothing more. Okay, I could learn other things along the way. Maybe the additional things that I would learn is not that difficult to obtain. But nevertheless, as for everything else in general, you don't really have to stress yourself to know everything in order to be a successful consultant. Now, clients are looking for people who can do one or more of the following. So now, knowing what you can probably offer, knowing your skills, your capabilities, your experience, you can zero in on the typical things that clients would be looking for. And it's not that difficult. Okay, what would be an example? Well, one, make the challenge of managing easier. So clients, they're swamped with day-to-day stuff, and leaders and managers definitely will be facing a lot of challenges in order to deliver what is expected of them as leaders and managers. But it's never easy. As a leader and manager myself, I know that it can be pretty difficult to manage people, to manage other clients, to manage vendors, to manage operations. Okay, and in the modern world, okay, and perhaps this is an effect of how capitalism has grown and evolved, right? Division of labor, uh, obsession perhaps to operational efficiency. Okay, you will realize that managers nowadays are hard pressed. Okay? Even if you can only help them with one of the many tasks that they have to do, this has value. You can provide them that value. Out of the million things, perhaps, and I'm exaggerating, of course, naturally, but out of the million things, out of the many things that the managers can do, if you can assure the manager that you can do just one of them really, really well, then you probably have business there. Okay, you'll be engaged for that particular task. Now, what are the other things that clients are looking for? Well, they need people, okay, who can provide knowledge and experience relative or relevant to their specific functions, sectors, and services that their work relates to. Um, Again, leaders and managers, they don't have to be all knowing, just as you don't have to be all knowing. But if somebody can provide them with additional knowledge and experience that can augment and supplement whatever it is that you already have, then of course they would want that. Okay. And another thing that clients are looking for would be having access to relationships that they need to do their job, right? I mean, access to network of people, network of other experts, network of decision makers, influencers. Sometimes they don't have that immediate access. And you, as a consultant, you can also offer that to your clients. Okay? Perhaps they just need to do some level of introduction and a little bit of coaching, perhaps, if they want to deal with other people outside of their sphere of influence. Okay, that's what consultants can do. Uh, Things like coaching needs, okay, or a mentor or a sponsor. That's another way of looking at consultancy as well. Okay? If you think about it, coaches, executive coaches, those who really talk to executives, senior leaders on developing certain skills, well, that's also a form of consultancy. Now, you can always try to expand your skills. As I said just a while ago, you can learn things if you want to. Um, Perhaps if you're not an expert in a certain field, then okay, it probably makes more sense for you to learn skills. Okay, learn additional knowledge. Maybe get a certification, perhaps. Okay, but don't be fooled into thinking that with some qualifications, the floodgates of work will open just because you have a certification and so and so. You're a certified security expert or you're a certified service management expert. Don't think that immediately you'll have a lot of options available for you. Naturally, for some vacancies, for some openings, perhaps they will require, as part of maybe some regulatory requirement, that you need to have certain certifications or qualifications. Okay. Perhaps the most obvious example would be working in an education institution. You need to have certain degrees. You probably need to have a master's degree or even a doctorate degree in order for you to be hired in those institutions. But nevertheless, in general, don't think that as soon as you get this training, as soon as you get certified, that things will open, that people will start to approach you, like running after you and getting your service as a consultant. That does not happen. Okay. In a way, the reason why that does not work, wherein you think that you get all these titles and then you start to get work already immediately, is because clients are really looking for a proven ability to deliver recommendations, to develop realistic plans, or to even implement change with them, relevant to their specific context or environment. Proven ability. This means that they're looking for some evidence, sometimes tangible even, that you can do it. It's not enough that you know something. It's not enough that somebody else gives you this piece of paper that says you are an expert in something like this. Okay, it helps. And sometimes it does help that you have that piece of paper. But if you really want to know what will make clients pay for that service, is that They're really looking for evidence that you can do it. And that's why in the world of consulting, it's important that you take care of your past clients. Why? Because your would-be clients would like to get some referrals or references. They will probably ask your past clients to see how you've been doing as their consultant. So in that sense, it's not enough that you just deliver something, okay? And as we've also said, perhaps in a previous lecture, relationships matter in the world of consulting. And how you take care of that relationship is really something that would help you bolster your chances of getting more and more business in the field of consulting. The best way to develop the right saleable skills is to credibly go after consulting engagements that make you credible in that field. Okay, um, it's like driving. Perhaps that's the best analogy I can think of. When you want to learn how to drive, right? If you want to be the best driver out there, well, the very first thing that you have to do is to actually drive. Okay? It's not enough that you theoretically learn, let's say, the mechanics of a car. It's not enough that you theoretically learn traffic rules, but you really have to apply and exercise all these things in an actual setting. Right? You have to drive the car. So in the case of consulting, if you really want to develop your portfolio of skills, your competencies, your service line, you have to be doing consulting work. But you don't really have to do consulting work that is big off the bat. The usual advice is that you'd want to do consulting work slowly, surely, no pressure. Okay. But what's important is that you're able to deliver what you've promised and do some sort of a quick win. Okay. And it's very important that when you go out there and do little consulting engagements, that you set what is known as realistic expectations. Okay? You don't want to be in a situation wherein you overpromise and then later on you just underdeliver. That's obviously not best. That's obviously not ideal. Okay. Now, when interacting with clients, okay, in this stage, what do you do when you really want to build your skills, your credibility as a consultant? Well, present your skills and experience in the most compelling way as relevant to the client's need. So it's not enough that you say that I'm an expert in security or an expert in storage or I'm an expert in business processes. No. I mean, you have to make sure that whatever it is that you have in terms of skills and experience, you can position it in such a way that the client actually needs those skills. So it's possible that some of the skills and experience that you might have, okay, wouldn't really fit the current need of your client or would-be client, but there could be some. Okay. And sometimes the match isn't obvious. You need to do a little bit more work so that you can really make that match. Sometimes putting it a bit of creativity. Now, what would be an example in this case? You can probably think of, for example, if some of them were thinking to improve their sales, increase their revenue, and they're thinking, well, I want to increase my revenue, so that means that would be in the level of marketing. But your skill set may be that you're in social media. You're good social media person, you know how to implement social media platforms. Well, you can connect both sides of the stories by saying, well, how do I convert my social media expertise into actually delivering more revenue for my client? Okay. Perhaps your client initially was thinking of some sort of a customer relationship management system. Okay. That can actually build revenue for them. Okay, that's sure. But since you're social media, you can't really say that, you know, I can do customer relationship management systems for you, even if your skill set is just really for social media. But if you understood that the need behind or underneath why that client would want a CRM system, and then position your social media skills in saying that, you know, I can also build revenue for you, the underlying need of your CRM system, by creating social media solutions for them, then that could possibly lead you to consulting engagement. And another thing, when interacting with clients, as you're building credibility, is that you need to make yourself rapidly familiar with the jargon of an industry. Um, you'll have to understand that while you're in IT, perhaps you're exercising IT skills, applying these skills in a certain manner, perhaps in a very narrow scope for now. But as you move higher, as you build more experience as a professional, you'll understand that certain industries have certain differences compared to other industries. So how you operate in one industry is not necessarily the same in others. So you have to know the language, the jargon, the vocabulary, okay, and even the culture, the customs, particular for that industry. Okay, that will make you more credible as a consultant. That will make you more believable, and that would attract more clients your way for that particular industry. Now let's talk about the types of services that you can build as a consultant. Well, before we go into that, there are what I would say two prerequisites when you try to build your service, your consulting service. Well, one, you have to understand that you need a competency. Competency is an objective statement of your capabilities. Objective. I mean, if you're good in network technologies, everybody else would be able to say that you're good in network technologies. Or if you're good in security, everybody else should be able to say that you're good in security. Okay. Credibility, okay, is a subjective perspective of clients and other consultants about you. Okay. Do you deliver on time? Are you innovative? Are you trustworthy? Okay. Are you the type who would be um, a real consultant's consultant, right? I mean, somebody dependable. Okay? When you're building your services, always remember that these two would always be hand in hand. Okay? When you start forming and eventually delivering those services, you need to be competent, meaning that you have the qualifications necessary to be able to run through with the service, and you need to be credible. You need to be someone that, without a doubt, if you say X, you really mean X, right? And there's no variability in interpretation. Now, the most basic way to label yourself is as a useful pair of hands. Sometimes we also call it a steady pair of hands. And the reason why this analogy is used in consulting is because steady pair of hands, if your hands are not steady, right, and you hold something very delicate, something very sensitive, if you're the type who's always jittery, okay, you will run the risk of actually dropping that sensitive or delicate object. It could break. Okay, and once it's broken, it may even be more difficult to piece them back together. Okay, so the normal analogy for consultants that these consultants, at the very least, should be a steady pair of hands, a useful pair of hands, or they could be another mind, another brain, another head that clients would like to tackle. So picking your brains, right? I mean, this is something that a client would love to have if you have a very good consultant. So before you go and really jump in, okay, and embark on something that you'd want to do in terms of consulting, understand that you need to be viewed, you need to be labeled even as somebody who's dependable. Okay, somebody who, at the minimum, if you ask for 10, you can deliver 10. Okay, and you do it very quickly. You do it in a short period of time. Yeah, it's possible that you can be very steady, but your steadiness takes too much time, and probably your client can't afford to wait. Okay, it's possible that there could be other clients who would probably do the same thing as you'd be doing, but they can do it in a shorter period of time. Okay, yeah, both of you are steady. You're steady. The other person, the other consultant is steady. But who do you think the client will approach eventually? The one who can actually do things fast, okay, with the same level of requirement in terms of stability, in terms of reliability. Now, when you position your service, okay, it's always useful to think of it against three dimensions which consulting services can be categorized into. So you look at it from the perspective of the sector or industry. You can look at it from the perspective of service line, or you can look at it as a phase in the change life cycle. Okay. So when we talk about sector, well, the usual question here is what industry sector your skills are most relevant to. Generally, your skills, especially as you go higher, as you will become more mature, more experienced in the field, you'll realize that certain industries appeal to you, certain industries don't. And based on those industries that appeal to you, more you're probably more of an expert there compared to the other industries. Like for example, you could be very good in telcos, okay, but you're not really good in manufacturing. As you can see, the telecommunication industry is completely different from a manufacturing industry. And well, naturally, you'll have to ask yourself, are you the type of person who's like a telco expert, or are you more of a manufacturing expert? Okay, so that's one thing. That's one way on how you can categorize your service. You're probably going to look at specific industries and not even mind or pay attention to the others. That's possible. No one is really an expert in all industries. It's quite difficult considering each industry would have uh, different ways of evolving. There are so many things that get updated along the way, and an attempt to be an expert in all of these industries and all of these sectors is really impractical. Another way of looking or categorizing your consulting service is through a service line. So the service line you work in, it's like a function in an industry, but it is somewhat broader. Okay. So what's an example of a function? Well, maybe you're an HR expert. You may be an accounting expert. You may be a production expert. You you may be an IT expert. Okay. Um, so everything else. I mean, in the function of the industry. But you could be an HR expert, but your expertise can work across industries. Okay? So you can be an HR expert in telco, in manufacturing, in retail, okay, in government. If you think about it, there could be some variations, but the variations aren't really that many. Therefore, your expertise in HR can work across industries. So, so that's one way of how to position your consulting service. You are a consultant based on a particular service line. Okay. Now, lastly, another way would be the type of service based on the phase in your change life cycle and the change life cycle of the company or of the client. Okay. And you could be like a strategic consultant. You could be an operational consultant. You could be involved in implementation plan or even in implementation consultant. Okay. Let's take a look at that more and more deeply. Okay. So when you look at strategy consulting, the question that you want to answer here, and you should be able to answer, is this: what should the client be trying to achieve? Okay. So if you think you can answer that question very well, then you might be doing strategy consulting. Now, what about operational consulting? The question that you want to answer very well is how well is the client performing and what should change? Okay? So things like audit, operational reviews, these are things that are part of operational consulting. If you think you can answer this question very well, then this is probably your service, okay, your consulting service. So what about implementation planning? Well, you are the type of person or type of consultant who can answer this question. When and how should the client make the change? Okay, things like change consultants. Okay? Um, if you think that you're the type of person who can really answer this question very well, then you might be a consultant whose service is actually in implementation planning. And lastly, um, when you're in implementation consulting, is you're the type of person who loves execution, who knows how to get things done, and can deliver sustainable change for the client. If you're very confident and you think objectively that you're really skilled in this area, then maybe this is your service, implementation consulting. Now, I mean, unpacking it further, if you take a look at the middle of the diagram, this was the previous image that we've talked about, but there could be other supplemental types of consulting service on top of that. For example, in the case of operational consulting, you might also be able to provide a service in terms of interim management. You could be someone who can like fill in a gap in terms of managing things in the current operations because you're well skilled in understanding the operations, okay, and you know how to immerse yourself or insert yourself in the client's current operations. Then you could probably offer interim management as a consulting service. Or when you go to the other side of implementation consulting, you might be somebody who can be like a contractor. Like you can like hire yourself temporary for a period of time to do whatever it is that they need to do. Okay? Or you can do typically, as with most IT consultants, technical consulting or development, delivering software or technology as part of the change. Okay? And that's why you see a lot of IT companies really heavy on consulting because normally they do this type of activity, which is technical consulting or systems development. And lastly, you could also provide outsourcing services. Like after a change has been implemented, maybe the client needs some maintenance or ongoing support for that system. Maybe no more change is expected, but as the company is using that new system, probably there's a need to take care of it from time to time. Maybe address certain questions from the users. You can be involved in outsourcing services in that respect. Okay. Now, lastly, we'll talk about how you position your services to your client. Okay, so you need to ask yourself this question: what do you need to have in place for clients to understand and accept your services? Okay, this is not really that easy. Okay, the first thing you'll have to remember is that you're not selling to yourself. Sometimes internally we think that, oh, I know deep in my heart this particular client will like the service that I'm going to offer. Okay, that's not always the case. You're not going to have a situation wherein how you think and your interests would be the same as that of the client. So maybe from a quick litmus test, talking to yourself on whether a certain service will sell or not might be good practice, but you'll have to remember that you're selling it to a client or to a potential client or to potential market. Okay, and if you're not part of that market in the first place, if you're not going to be a customer, okay, that you'd be willing to pay money for that, then don't sell to yourself. Right? Don't try to position your services as if you're selling to yourself. Okay. In which case, when you'd really want to position your service, you know what expertise you'd like to get your hands into. Well, just remember the 5 C's. Okay. And some of these things we've already talked a while ago. Well, you have to show that you're capable. Okay, that you have the capability. Okay, that you have the experience. Okay, that you've gone through a lot of battles. Okay, you have to be viewed as competent. Okay? In other words, the skills, the talent, the experience that you have is something that can be validated and verifiable. Okay? You have to be coherent. In other words, whatever it is that you plan or whatever it is that you intend to execute, you can actually do it. There's no gaps. There are no gaps in execution. You're coherent. You're credible. Okay, similar to coherence. Okay, but credibility is more broad. Like they view you, others view you as somebody who can deliver, as somebody who has a steady pair of hands, as somebody who's really interested in the welfare of the client and not just out there to make a buck. Right? And lastly, the 5th C is being client centric. Always focused on the needs of the client and not on the needs of the consultant. Okay? And with that, we actually end this particular talk on how you can build your consulting service. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or send me a note, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. With that, thank you for listening, and see you around.